I would like to introduce sales engineer Jill Watwood and product manager Charlie Peters. We're going to have a really fun session today. They're going to go over some marketing essentials of Daxko Engage. So let's take it away. Feel free, everyone, to use the chat if you'd like to ask any questions, and everybody have fun.
Hello and welcome everyone to this marketing-focused Ask the Expert session. This is the second in a several months long series of webinars that we're calling Project Thrive. So before we get into the details of this today, I'd love for Jill and myself to introduce ourselves. So Jill, if you don't mind, let us know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Jill Watwood, sales engineer, like Jordan mentioned. And I have actually, I've been with Daxko for around 8 years. I have held a few different roles. Before this role, I was actually a trainer. So I was on site with maybe some of you all training you as you go live and launch on our Daxko solution. So I got to travel a lot of the country doing that and hanging out with our customers. So happy to be here today.
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and I'm happy you have joined us today. My name is Charlie Peters. I have also, Jill, been with Daxko for about 8 years. We must have started around the same time. And I too have held a number of different roles. I began in the services team and implementation, and for the past 3 years have worked in the product management team. So some of that time with Daxko Engage, and then more recently with Daxko Operations. And so what that means as a product manager is that I work with a team of user experience designers, software engineers, test engineers to create new features within our system, as well as enhance existing features, just to make sure that your jobs at the YMCA, JCC, community centers, Boys and Girls Clubs are more efficient, perhaps more enjoyable, but also so that you have time to do the good work that you do in your community. So a few words about how this series came about. It's a couple of things. First, we, as a Daxko team, have been listening to some of our recent NPS feedback. So if you are a user of our system, which chances are you are, if you've joined us today, you have likely seen surveys within our products where we're wanting to learn how likely you are to recommend our software to friends or colleagues, and also just digging into some of those reasons why you would or would not. And in collecting a lot of this feedback, we've heard a lot of common themes. And one of those, which you'll know probably nearly and dearly, is that there's just been a lot of turnover at your associations. You don't have the time or the resources to train new staff all the time, or you're otherwise maybe just not aware of some of the features that are already available or how to use them. You don't know where to go or who to ask about that. So that's one of the motivating factors behind these Ask the Expert sessions. Another one is last month, a few weeks ago at this point, a good number of Daxko team members were at the NATO conference. So that was a YMCA fundraising conference in Tampa. And it was really the first time in a couple of years that a lot of folks had the opportunity to see people face to face. And it was a great opportunity to meet and to greet some of you all who maybe have joined today. But at that conference as well, our team heard a lot about staff turnover and just the need to gain system knowledge throughout all the products that Daxko offers, specifically through something like a continuous education program. And so that is where Project Thrive was born. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is just the second webinar in this series. And at this point, we really need your help. We need to learn how we can continue to support your teams. We need to learn how we can grow and evolve these sessions to make the most of your team's time and your resources. And maybe most importantly, how can we get to know you and your teams and take advantage of platforms like this to build relationships and maybe even have a little bit of fun in the process of learning software. So on that note, these sessions will be informal. We want them to feel like a conversation where you can ask us anything on your mind. So feel free to put those in the chat as they come to you. Either me or Jill or some of our colleagues will do our best to follow up with those. However, there may be some things that we don't have an immediate answer to, or that we can't demo on the fly. So we may need to follow up with additional items. So be prepared for that as well. These sessions are being recorded, and we will make them available for you to review later or to share with your colleagues as needed. We also understand in preparing for this session that we have a lot of people who are joining us today who maybe are very new to using Daxko Engage or Daxko operations. Maybe you've just joined your organization the past few weeks or months, but then we also have many users who have been using these tools for years and are super users, as we say. And so for that reason, these initial sessions will likely begin by covering some of the fundamentals, but over time, we plan to cover topics and features in greater and greater detail and a lot of depth. So, and a lot of what we cover next is going to be based on what you tell us and what you want to hear more of. Finally, before I hand it off to Jill, we do plan to hold these sessions multiple times each week, and sometimes even twice a day. And so topics will include things like marketing, as today's will, as well as membership, programs, childcare, accounting, as well as other tools like PlayerSpace and GroupX Pro. So please stay tuned in the coming weeks and coming months for all the opportunities that you and your team have to continue learning. And ultimately, we want you all to know and to feel and to get out of these sessions that Daxko is here. We're here for you. We're your partner. We want to help you learn and make our software not only efficient, but also enjoyable to use. So as I begin to pass this off to Jill and as she gets set up, are there any questions, any comments about this series and what to expect moving forward? I'll give a quick overview of what we're going to cover, and then I will hand it over to Jill. So any questions, feel free to put them in there. It's great seeing where everyone is joining us from. Thank you for taking time today. So the first things that Jill will cover, she'll give, like I mentioned, a general overview of Daxko Engage. I know we have some associations and organizations who are users of Daxko Engage who are joining us today. We also may have some folks who are maybe just curious about Engage. Your association doesn't use it. So we're going to start fairly basic and go over some of the highlights of what Daxko Engage is, how that integrates with Daxko operations. Jill will talk through groups and initiatives and the marketing components of Engage. We'll also be taking a look at ways to use Daxko operations to efficiently manage prospects and then see how Engage can maybe help automate some of the follow-up to those prospects, which is so important. And so again, throughout the session, feel free to use the chat. We'll do our best to stay on top of those. So after that introduction, I will hand it off to Jill.
Sounds good. Thank you, Charlie. I will go ahead and get my screen shared here. Charlie, can you see that okay? Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick look, like Charlie mentioned, really just starting off with what is Daxko Engage. So as you can imagine, and probably what you're thinking, it's that marketing component, and that is completely correct. But also we want to mention just briefly the internal side of Daxko Engage as well. So the first thing that you're seeing, this is our home screen of Daxko Engage, Charlie just mentioned the integration. So you are seeing on our screen, of course, these are from our demo site. So these lovely headshots of everyone that are checking in. So as soon as someone checks in, their member card automatically in real time populates here in Daxko Engage for any Daxko Engage users to see. But not only is it just showing, that person just checked in and how long ago, but it's also giving some great details, like if they're a donor, a board member, if they were a staff or a volunteer member. So that's, just at a quick glance, staff who are utilizing Daxko Engage, they might interact differently with someone who, like Carol, who is a board member and a donor, for example. And then also I can simply flip over a member card, and here's some of the internal pieces that you can utilize, like adding in notes. If I happen to have a conversation with Lena here, maybe about some of her goals, her interest in volunteering or participating in programs, this is a great way for staff to enter in notes And she may not be ready to say sign up to volunteer right this second or today, but she might be tomorrow. And if Charlie is the staff member who interacts with Lena tomorrow, he would be able to see the notes that I leave. And also tasks. So if, Lena maybe needs something and I'm unable to provide that, maybe it's personal training and I don't do personal training and she wants more information. This would be great for me to simply send a task over to someone who can help her with that. So I can actually assign this to one staff member. I could also assign it to an entire team. If, if you set up teams, maybe your personal training team or your membership team. So that's a great way to really streamline internal tasks. And then lastly, I did want to briefly mention, you can see that Lena actually has this indicator here in the top left corner, and it's telling us that she is highly likely to remain active in the next 90 days. This is what we call our retention indicator. This is so important because we at Daxko have over 20 years of experience working with nonprofits just like you all. And we are able to utilize that by building an algorithm that can give you insights like how likely someone is to remain active in the next 90 days. And we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. So now that we've taken a quick look at this homepage, we're going to go ahead and jump into our groups. So now we are really looking at that marketing, that outbound communication. So once I jump into groups here, I'm going to go ahead and create my own. A group is your targeted audience that you build using a set or even just one rule that narrows down your audience. We understand that it's so important to ensure that when you are sending out communication, that communication is relevant to those recipients of those emails or text messages. So that is where groups comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to walk through an example here. We're going to walk through an example of wanting to promote some aquatics registration or aquatics programs that we have coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and title my group here Aquatics Registration. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at these rules. You'll see to the left, we have a huge list here of group rules is what we call them. They're all categorized. So as you can see, the first category here is really around membership. Things like member status, for example. Maybe whatever communication I'm sending out, around these aquatics programs, maybe I just want to reach out to those members who have an active status currently. So I can go ahead and select active and add the rule. And it just sifted through our entire membership database, which happens to have quite a few people, as you can see. And it narrowed down my list and my group, my targeted audience, to this number that you're seeing on the screen. So in a quick way, you can really start to narrow down your audience. And then what's really important is that these rules, these groups are very dynamic. So for example, if I'm an active member today, I'm going to populate in this group that you see here to the right. But let's say Charlie is maybe currently inactive, but tomorrow he comes in and renews his membership. He's going to fall into this group tomorrow once that actually happens, once he meets that group rule. So these are dynamic. So essentially your groups are always up to date, as opposed to the whole exporting and importing. That process is really a list that is only as accurate as that moment that you export. So we'll continue to look at the group rules here. I mentioned that retention indicator on the home screen. You get a quick glance as soon as someone checks in what their retention indicator is. And remember, it is the likelihood that they are going to remain active in the next 90 days. But you can actually see the range of indicators here, ranging from critical to highly likely to remain active in the next 90 days. And how this is working is through an algorithm. So like I mentioned, we have all of that data of over 20 years of information on nonprofits, and we were able to build out an algorithm that looks at different data points to determine that likelihood of someone remaining active. Now, a quick thing to mention there is out of those different data points, they are weighted differently. So for example, if it's looking at, a couple of my data points like length of membership, that might be weighted a little more heavily than say my facility usage. I might come in not very often right now, but maybe in the summer is usually when I really heavily have that coming into the facility and doing those group exercise classes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Jill.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before you move on, we did have a question in the Q&A about what the retention score was based on. So I think you did a good job of covering all the data points. So I frankly, I lose track of how many. I would say dozens. I think it's between 40 and 50 different data points about a membership. And we have a team of data scientists who are far more intelligent than I am and could speak to this much more eloquently than I'm able to. But we've essentially used that couple decades of membership data, tracking trends in retention, length of membership, and are able to pick up on patterns. And so what we're seeing here with critical, for example, is this member who's maybe flagged as critical has a lot of the same attributes as other members we've seen in the past who terminate within 90 days or so. And so we're looking, as Jill said, at things like length of membership, even demographics, age, type of billing, engagement through program registrations, facility visits, whether or not they donate, all the aspects of a membership, and using that to make a best guess on the likelihood of this member to remain a member or not. So again, it is an algorithm that our data scientists have built, and it is something that we retrain and remodel throughout the year. So it's consistently getting more accurate and updating based on the trends that we're seeing. So I hope that provides a bit more clarity into how that's flagged. And again, a critical would be the most likely to terminate within the next 90 days based on that member's membership attributes, and then high would be highly engaged or not likely to terminate. So
that's right. And also each individual retention indicator for the members are updated every month. So as they, their behaviors change, it's also being updated each month for you to view that. And then very similarly, we have the donor indicator. This indicator, however, is showing how likely someone is going to donate or a unit is going to donate within the next 6 months. So it works similarly, ranging from that low indicator to very highly likely to donate in the next 6 months. This is a great way to create your audience who are likely to donate when it comes time to promoting that campaign that you have going on, or I've actually spoken to a few people over the past couple of weeks who are having Cinco de Mayo events this week. So this would be a great way to reach out to those individuals and really hone in on those units that you're likely to see those donations from. Anything to add there, Charlie? Anything else with those indicators before we move on?
No, I think you covered that well, Jill. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Then we have some continued group rules around membership dates, like your termination and scheduled termination dates. You have that facility usage. You can hone in on an audience of people based on how often or maybe not how often they visit. You've got demographics, communication preferences around emails and text messages. Even if someone has pledged a certain amount within a certain time frame when it comes to giving. And speaking of, we've even got the ability for you to create group rules around discount groups. If you're promoting something around, an upcoming campaign or something like that, you may choose to not include those who are currently utilizing a discount group or a scholarship for, membership, that sort of thing. So it may even be the opposite, where you're really not wanting to include a certain group of people. Lastly, we do have some group rules around programs. childcare, camp, and program packages. So since we are really looking at an aquatics registration group, I'm going to go ahead and select into the programs and pull a group of people who have registered for past aquatics programs. You can see there's several different pieces of information I can add here. If you are a multi-branch association, I saw Fox Cities, a couple of you are here today. So I've actually been up there a few times. And so I know that there are quite a few locations. So you might want to include multiple locations in this or not. You also have the ability to just select one. And then what you can do is go ahead and select the years of the programs that you're wanting to pull in. So as maybe you want to pull in those who participated last year, maybe the year before, you can pretty much go back as far as you would like based on the information, of course, that you have in the system. And then you're going to select your program tag. So these will be identical to what you see in Daxko operations. So simply, it's a smart search, so you can start typing. However, lucky for me, aquatics happens to be the first one here. And then lastly, I will go ahead and begin using the smart search to type in the basically the sessions, which I've selected anything with the word swim in it under the program tag aquatics. So I could get very granular here and only select certain sessions if I would like. I can also select all, which I'm going to do here. And then it actually doesn't stop there. I can even get as granular as including or not including those who were just on the wait list, as well as including or not including those who ended up registering but canceled. So right now it's just set as all of those, even including those who are on the wait list and just anyone who registered, whether they canceled or not. And then I will simply add the rule. And once again, it's going to sift through our entire database here. So now I've got a group of 51 people. At this point, maybe this is where I want my group to stay. Maybe this is a good number, or maybe I would like to go in and edit or remove the rules that I've already created at this point. But I'm actually going to add one last rule. And I'm going to jump back down to the programs. However, I'm going to select have not registered this time. And what I'm going to do is select those same locations, but I am going to then select this year's sessions. So the session start year being this year, still under aquatics. And once I type in swim, I'm going to see the swim programs or sessions that we have set up currently for this year. And so once I go ahead and add this rule, what's going to happen? Oh, what did I, forget. Oh, I guess I didn't select all. You do have to select the actual sessions. And then once again, it's going to sift through, which the number has stayed the same, meaning no one has yet registered. And that could be because our current sessions, maybe they're not open yet. But what's really great about this group is if I were to send out an initiative with, say, 3 emails, the first one, letting people know that registration is coming soon, maybe giving them that date. The second email, letting them know registration opens today, having that register now button for them to go ahead and register their children. And then maybe that last email, a couple days or a week later, telling them to, don't forget to register. Hopefully, out of these 51 people, when they receive that second email, letting them know that registration is now open, hopefully some of them actually do go ahead and register their children for those swim programs or sessions. And so what happens then is they would then fall out of this group because I have that rule of have not registered. So once they registered, they fall out of that and they don't need to receive that third email, and they're not going to because they've fallen out of the group rules. So going back to just how dynamic these groups can be and how accurate the list always is when it comes to you sending out communication. So we could go ahead and create this group. And then we are ready to move on to our initiatives. So here's our group. We can even export this group if we would like. If we do need to go back in and edit, we can do that. But at this point, we will say everything looks good, and it's time to move on to building out our communication workflow, or what we call initiatives. So I'm going to jump into this aquatics marketing initiative that we've already built in the system. You'll see that in Daxko Engage, when building an initiative, it simply walks you through the 4 steps here at the top. The first one being identifying the purpose. So a few quick things is just naming your initiative. Of course, you want to be able to find it again later. You can tie it to a specific branch here. And then you can add your purpose or categorize what this communication is around. So of course, this one's aquatic, so it's program communication. What's so important about selecting the purpose here is, although the likelihood that someone is going to unsubscribe is a lot less since you've targeted your audience and made sure that the information that they receive is relevant to them. But what happens is if they do still choose to unsubscribe, they're going to see this list that you're seeing, this list of purposes, and they're going to have a checkbox next to each, and they can simply check and uncheck the types of communication that they do want to receive in the future, as opposed to, most solutions where, when you receive emails, it's usually you're either subscribed to all or you have to unsubscribe to all. So that is not the case here. We then have our reoccurrence. This is also very important. A one-time reoccurrence is essentially you telling the system, once I build this initiative and select my audience or my group here, I want it to run, and then I want it to simply end. Once all of those individuals in that group receive my workflow of communication, I then just want it to end. The ongoing reoccurrence, however, essentially you're telling the system that you want this initiative to run from here on out all the time until someone comes in and maybe tells it to stop or wants to make changes. So what happens is, let's say, for example, you want, if someone does not visit or check in within a certain time frame, say 60 days or 90 days, you want them to automatically receive an email saying that you miss them, so that they know that they are missed and that it's noticed that they haven't been in so long. Maybe even providing them with someone's contact information if they have any questions or need anything. So for that example, you might want that to happen. You set up this communication and just that automation continues forever. If anyone meets that group rule of not checking in within 60 days, they automatically receive that communication workflow. So that's an example of an ongoing reoccurrence. It can really save you a lot of time because you are essentially setting up automation there. So we will go ahead and move to the next step, which is very simple. You are selecting your audience or your group here that you've already built. And you can even select multiple groups. So for some of you who are utilizing Daxko Engage today, this is somewhat of newer functionality, the ability to select multiple groups. So be sure that if there are multiple groups that you're wanting to communicate with when building an initiative, that you select all of them. You can simply search here to the right for the group name and check those checkboxes next to the groups that you want to communicate with. Now, here's the step 3, defining the workflow that you are going to actually add in your communication. You have your emails, your tasks, wait times, and even that SMS text messaging. So the first thing we have set up in this initiative is an email. So we'll go ahead and jump into our email editor here. It's very user-friendly. I always like to joke that for me to build something like this, I have zero marketing background. So if I can do it, you definitely can do it, especially when a lot of you probably do have that marketing background. So it is drag and drop functionality. So if I simply want to add a button, say here, I just drag and drop. Then I can select into that button. I can add in some merge tags, of course, add my URL. I want to make sure that when someone selects the button, that they are taken wherever I choose for them to go. I can do all kinds of things like the color of the button, the font, the size of the button. So there's a lot of configuring and customizing that you can do here. And then if I choose, never mind, I don't want that button there, it's a simple trash can, which is very helpful for someone like me to keep it as easy and user-friendly as possible. I also really appreciate the autosave. I don't know if any of you have ever had this happen, but you know, if you're building something and then all of a sudden your computer dies or it crashes, that is not a good day for anyone. So having this autosave is a pretty important feature for someone like me. You can also save these emails as templates. So if you want to use this email again in the future, or maybe someone else at your association would like to use this, maybe a different branch instead of starting from scratch, that's a great way to create templates and then share them as well as use them again in the future. You can also send yourself a test. Once again, something I know I would definitely appreciate if this were my role. Then you can also preview. So you can send yourself a test and view it on your, in your own email inbox, or you can preview what is this going to look like on a desktop, as well as what is this going to look like on a mobile device. We all know that today, these recipients of emails, myself included, I'm typically receiving and viewing my emails on my mobile device or a tablet. So it's really important that we ensure everything looks as it should for that mobile experience. So we'll go ahead and close out of that email and move to the next workflow piece of the workflow here, which is an SMS text message. It's so simple to add in a text message. Simply add in your text here, and you are able to keep up with how many segments or text messages as you type each word out. It is keeping up with that here at the bottom. So it's really easy. If you are not wanting this text message to be sent out and received as 2 text messages, you simply make sure that the number of words and letters here, that you only see that number 1 when it comes to the segments. Then you have your wait time, which can be as little or as many days. Maybe you just need 1 day in between these pieces of communication, or maybe you need 6 months. So you can definitely play around with your wait times and ensure that your audience does have that break that might be needed in between your communication workflow. We then have our task. So a task is really great when you are wanting that personal touch from your staff members when it comes to this audience. So we've added a task here for the staff members to actually call these individuals who are in the groups that we selected. We've added instructions for the staff members to follow. We've also told the staff members how many days should they complete all of these calls within. And then lastly, we are able to assign this task to either one staff member or that team of staff members. So in this case, we've selected a team. And what's great about that is the system will evenly distribute those tasks. So for example, if there were 50 people in the group, there were 5 people on Alex's team, it would give each of them 10 tasks. And they are able to check on their tasks here within the system and actually complete them. So that anyone with that manager permission does have visibility into what happened, maybe what the call, how the call went, and that sort of thing. And then we'll move on to our last step here, which is the review step. So this is essentially giving you the opportunity to read through everything and just make sure that you have everything set up the way that you would like before you either schedule this initiative to go out at a later date or time, or if you're ready, you could even launch it right now. The schedule feature is really important if you want this communication workflow, maybe to go out on, say, Saturday afternoon, when I hope that most of you aren't sitting at your desk, at work. So that's a great way to go ahead and build out your initiatives when you have the time, when time allows. I know time is very precious, and then schedule it out to just launch when you would like it to. So anything, Charlie, to add here? Were there any questions that I need to answer around any of this before I pass it over back to you?
No, I think you did a great job, Jill, covering the highlights of groups and initiatives. And as I'm sure everyone can tell, there's a lot more we can get into there. We did have a lot of questions around email preferences and settings and what's available for members. So I'm available to kind of show some of that in just a second to answer some of those questions. Yeah, I think that was good.
Awesome. Well, I will pass it over to you then.
Thank you. So before I demonstrate some of that, I wanted to, if you are new to Daxko Engage for whatever reason, maybe you're a new user in general or have not seen Engage very often, it could seem overwhelming, the array of group rules and all the combinations, as well as all the capabilities provided through initiatives. So I did want to point out, and I won't go in too much detail here, but I did want to point out that we have initiative templates, which you can think of as a library of ideas that our team has built out. So our experience and implementation team has designed some of the kind of best practices in email design and some recommendations for initiatives to build. So if you find yourself at a loss for what to do or how to do it, feel free to browse the initiative templates. If you see something you like, you can copy it, make a few adjustments to the email to make it yours. But really, our plan here was to do 80 or 90% of the work. If you don't have time to design an email, that way you can start communicating with your community. So I did want to point out the initiative templates as a nice place to get started if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with all the options available. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We had a few attendees asking about Daxko operations, and so we did want to touch on some of the features that come into play when we talk through marketing. So the first thing I wanted to point out so we were getting a lot of great questions around members subscribing to the different purposes that you outlined, Jill, with each initiative can have a purpose, and then members and recipients can control what he or she wants to receive from your association. So there is a way for members to do that on their own in a self-service kind of way by logging into their online account through Daxko operations. But there is also a way for staff members to trigger that. So I'm going to walk through really quickly the latter example there. So this is an example of, hey, maybe Adam called the front desk and said, hey, for some reason I'm not getting any of your emails anymore. Can you look into that for me? And so we really do want members and recipients to control their preferences on their own. And so the way that could be solved is by going to the member record for Adam here, clicking on his email here, and there's this send email settings email, and that will go to the email address we have on file here. And again, this would be for Daxko operations customers who also have Daxko Engage, this kind of linking of Engage preferences. So if I click this, an email goes to this member's inbox. This happens to be my email address, so I will save you the hassle of going through my inbox. This is what it looks like to the member. So now I can see what I've opted into, what I've opted out of. If I've opted out of everything inadvertently in the past, or maybe I ended my membership, but I've rejoined and I want to control that again, I can toggle on or off all of these preferences. And these, as you'll notice, line up with the preferences or the purposes that Jill walked through. So I did want to point that out. Again, members can do the same thing on their own through the online account, but staff have the ability to trigger that as well. Okay, in our remaining couple of minutes here, I did want to walk through some other marketing focused components when it comes to Daxko operations, and specifically around prospecting and prospects. And so the first thing I want to walk through is the add prospect feature. So this may be something that you are very familiar with or maybe brand new to you. This is the ability to add someone who is not a full-fledged member. They haven't been a member before, but they've expressed interest. Maybe that was through a form they filled out at a community health fair or some other way that you're collecting prospect information. The first thing you'll notice in the difference between a prospect and an inactive member or active member is how few fields of information are required for a prospect. We do want that to be something very quick and painless when someone just wants to identify that they're interested. So this is what your team would do in entering a new prospect. So if I had someone walk in to the branch to ask some questions on their lunch break, I can quickly put in their name, email address, and phone number. Those 4 fields are required. There are some additional information that you can collect if that prospect is willing to provide it. For many years, that was the only way that prospects could be added to Daxko operations. Within the past couple of years, we have also added a new feature called Manage Forms that does come with its own permission level. So if you haven't come across that yet, it may be because of your user role permissions. But we do have a Manage Forms option, and this essentially creates that add prospect form in a prospect or community facing way. And so associations have the ability to create a new form, give it a name, provide the context for what this form is used for. You can assign it to a branch or have it apply to all the branches at your organization. You can also choose the type. So maybe you have a prospect form that you create for walk-ins and you have it queued up on a tablet at your front desk so people can kind of self-serve and add that on their own. Or maybe you have an event where your team is out in the community and you can actually even assign it to a specific event. And then it collects information about those prospects and adds them automatically into Daxko operations as a prospect. And so when creating a form, you have a couple of options as far as how you surface it and make it available. The first is through a link, so you can truly access this as a web page. And so this is the example here. I've changed my view here to be kind of a tablet view just to show that this is mobile responsive and mobile friendly. So the example I gave earlier would be maybe you have a tablet that your team is walking around with collecting prospect information at a community event or a fundraiser. Maybe this is something you have up at the front desk and it's really not manned by staff, but it's kind of quick and easier for people to input information. The other option for forms is that we do provide a code snippet. So if you are savvy with web development or you have a web development team behind your website, you can insert this into your website. And I do have an example, and this is also a bit of a commercial for our agency team who has presentations lined up as part of this project as well. But this is an example of one of the websites that our agency web development team has created for the YMCA of Greater Houston. And I pulled this up because I want to show an example of what that prospect collection form looks like in a website. So this is the same form using the embed snippet and customized in terms of CSS and the HTML for this particular website, but just wanted to show the range of options available. And anyone who comes to this particular website and puts in their name, email address, phone number is added into Daxko operations as a prospect. So I didn't want to point that out as a great lightweight and efficient way to collect lead information automatically, so not requiring your team to add those manually. And then just to kind of bring it full circle back to Daxko Engage and some of the benefits you would have as a Daxko Engage user when it comes to things like groups and initiatives, which Jill just walked through. So the examples that Jill provided were for active and inactive members, but we also have another audience option here that allows you to create groups for prospects. And so prospects are a different type of record, a different kind of member record in Daxko operations. The way that you follow up with prospects is probably different. So you can choose prospects as your audience and then begin adding rules. You'll notice a much shorter list of group rules here for prospects, but you are able to sort by things like source. So I want to see prospects with this particular source. So categorizing our follow-up based on how we initially interacted with this person. I can also find people who were created as a prospect within a specific time frame. And so maybe I have any prospect created within the last 3 days, and I will add that rule. And as Jill demonstrated earlier, rules can be stacked on top of each other. And so maybe, since we just talked about forms, maybe I want to follow up very specifically with our prospects who filled out one form in particular. So maybe I have this special event, or we're advertising interest in the new area of our community. We're opening a new branch, and so maybe I've been collecting interest through a prospect form for that new branch, and I want to select that particular web lead form. And so now I'm really narrowing my focus into leads who came in for this particular form. Maybe it was on my website, maybe it was on a tablet within the past 3 days. And so you can start to see all the ways that you can add criteria to make your lists even more targeted. And then you're probably already getting here as well, but the ability to set up an initiative that automatically follows up with the prospects who meet this criteria. So as Jill mentioned earlier, groups are dynamic, meaning that they're updating every day. So right now you'll notice this group doesn't have anyone in it because I haven't had any leads who filled out this form within the past 3 days, but the past 3 days is always refreshing. So eventually, as leads are completing this form, there will be people joining this group. And then if you have an ongoing initiative set up to send that initial follow-up email, or maybe you're assigning out tasks to your team or sending a quick text message, all of that can happen automatically and kind of off your team's plate to ensure that kind of the first follow-up is happening with these prospects. So I'll pause there. I know I covered a lot in 2 different products, so that could have been confusing for some folks. Jill, do we get any questions I can help?
Yeah, I think so. So we actually had 2 around, they were both around, if you have any advice or best practices when it comes to trying to make sure that the emails that you're sending out are actually reaching the members and not going into their spam or junk folders.
Yeah, that to me sounds like another topic idea for one of these future marketing sessions. I think there's just a lot to go into with email marketing best practices. And so the first things that come to mind are your emails targeted and focused? So are you just including a ton of links within emails? I think those are sometimes more likely to be flagged as spam activity. Check things like your subject line. So I think that there's a lot of details that we can go into, and I'd love to hear more about maybe some of the examples where we see sometimes emails are ending up in junk folders, and I think it varies depending on the email provider too. So that there's a degree to which you can control some of that in how you design the emails and the campaigns you're sending. But there's also some of that is just really trying to anticipate what some of the email providers' filters look like and all of that. So hope that at least addresses that, and maybe I'll take note of that as a maybe future topic on kind of email deliverability and things like that.
Yeah, and then we just had one come in asking around, can you please review how a member can unsubscribe themselves from specific emails? So I believe, if I'm understanding that question correctly, you're wanting to maybe see, within an email, there's, you definitely would add that unsubscribe option so that when that recipient does receive it, they would see the unsubscribe at the bottom. Well, actually, or wherever you would like to put it. Typically, it's at the bottom, though.
Yeah. So yeah, we can review that real quick. So in this email that Jill walked through earlier, there was this manage email preferences link. And so one thing to point out, and Jill, I can't remember if you mentioned this, but having an unsubscribe link is required for all emails. And so we certainly encourage adding something like manage email preferences or unsubscribe from this list. But if you happen to forget we will add the unsubscribe link for you, so that just ensuring that you are being compliant with email marketing best practices. So for this example, when we're using manage email preferences in this email, if I receive this as a member or recipient and I clicked on this link, it would actually take me to this page too. So each email address, each contact you have at your association has its own opt-out preferences page. And so there are multiple ways to get there through the email. That link at the bottom of the email is one way, probably the most common way. It's also available through that staff in-house flow through operations. And then the third option would be the member in their online account going to their email settings and accessing this page. So they all funnel to this particular opt-out preferences. So if someone wants to manage that on their own, they can do that there.
So yeah, I think that was the last question as of now. Any other questions? You're welcome.
This is just a reminder to everyone, we will be sending out the recording of this session by this Friday. So if you'd like to review all of the wonderful things that Jill and Charlie shared with us, that will be available to you. But we do have a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions. I think Katie might have one.
That's actually a great idea, Katie. Charlie, she's asking, can you add texting best practices as another subject for the future?
Yes. That's actually something Jill and I talked about yesterday, is thinking through future ideas. And we would love to dig into text messaging best practices and how to manage that. Some other topics we're thinking of. The email editor is its own, kind of section of Daxko Engage, and a lot to go into with designing emails. There are a ton of features available. There's actually some that I need to dig into and follow up with Diane. I wasn't able to answer one of those questions about kind of linking to sections within an email. And the email editor is actually something that's always growing. So new features are being added all the time. So that's one thing we want to talk through. Another item would be lead management. So a relatively new feature available with Daxko Engage that really provides the kind of the tools that you would need to manage a prospecting funnel and do things like membership sales or program registration sales. So those are just a few of the topics. We'd love to hear more from you all on other thoughts you have.
So I see Jeff's question around, he is new to his organization, and is there any type of networking professional group he can join for association directors of marketing and communication? That's a good question. Maybe some of the audience members here, if anyone has any great suggestions, drop it in the chat. So Charlie, there's also been a few questions around prospects in Dax operations and being able to be converted to a member. So correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, go ahead. But I did mention something. It's probably best to actually show it.
Yeah. I just scrolled to see that. Yeah, I'll do my best to answer that quickly. So the first thing would be adding events. And so I referenced earlier events as one of the types of prospects that can be added. So to add an event, it's under the membership tab under prospects, and then just a very simple way to add events or to archive them if they're past. So if I wanted to add new, let's see, community health fair, I can give it a date. So maybe this is next weekend. Now that's on my list of events. And so when I go to add a prospect and choose event, that is now available. And then in a similar way, if I'm creating a form, I can create a form that's specific to this event, and then all prospects that were created are tied to this specific event. What I didn't walk through, so I'm thankful for this question, is view prospects. And so this is where your team can see we're in a test site, so to go back a couple of months to see prospects that were added. So, oh look, Jill, she's a web lead. So this is where you see the prospects that are added, whether it's through the in-house experience that I just walked through or through a form. And so here is also where staff with the appropriate permission, so I think the permission is just being able to add a new unit, will be able to convert to member. And this takes you through the existing flow of converting a prospect. And then there's also a duplicate check. So if there is potentially an inactive member that's already in your system from years and years ago, maybe Jill forgot that she had been a member for whatever reason, you're able to either use that old possible duplicate or continue creating a new one.
Oh, Diana, that is a great suggestion. Diana mentioned that, Charlie, for future meetings, it might be a good idea to even have breakout groups in Zoom so the different agencies can actually chat, you know, like what's working well for them and give each other advice. That's actually a great idea.
Yes, and I'm actually a little bit overwhelmed with these thoughts and ideas coming through. That's exactly what we wanted to see for our first marketing session. We want to learn how these can continue to grow. I saw a question from Molly about allow email as a setting in Daxko operations and how that impacts Daxko Engage. I'll file that away as another topic, and probably can cover again in more detail the subscription preferences with that. So that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and Bari, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Regarding tasks in Daxko Engage, is there any way to add more than one user? I believe what you're referring to is when you create a task, can you send it to multiple people? So you can create teams in Daxko Engage and actually send tasks to an entire team of staff members. I believe that's what you're asking, but if you're asking something different, please let us know.
I'll jump in on that. So one point of clarity, and this, I'm not sure this was what was being asked, but if a team is selected, and let's say this team here, Alex's team is the example, and there were 5 people on that team, the task will not go to all 5. It will go to someone on that team. I'm not sure if that was the question. So we did, you know, when designing this, we learned that when you assign it to multiple people, it is not clear who owns that. If I get a task assignment and Jill gets the same one, and then 4 other people get that, the sense of ownership and urgency is not there. So we do assign it to one person always, but you're also able to divide your users up into teams to better manage that. And then supervisors and managers are able to keep track of which tasks are being completed or not at the team level.
And Jordan, there was a question asked by Annette. She said she was unable to make last week's session, but she would like the recording. How can she get access to that?
Yeah, so all registrants for last week's and this week's sessions will be emailed a link to the recordings of all of the sessions by this Friday.
Perfect.
All right, so thank you all again for taking the time to join us today, asking great questions. I hope you'll stay tuned for future sessions on marketing as well as other items. So as you noticed here, we just really scratched the surface into what Daxko Engage can do, and even some of what operations can do to help streamline some of your prospecting processes. And we hope to dig into a lot of these items in future sessions. So continue to let us know what will be helpful for you. Stay tuned for 2 other sessions in the Project Thrive series coming up later this week. One on preparing for camp with Player Space, and one with our agency, so our website team on SEO, I believe, so search engine optimization. So that may be relevant to some of the folks who joined today, so I wanted to call that as well. But yeah, anything else to add, Jill or Jordan?
Let's see. We just had one quick question coming in. Well, I guess it's two. So you only wanted 2 people to complete a particular task. It's best to create a team with the 2 of them?
Yeah, so I think that makes sense. So if the example would be, maybe you have a team to call new members and welcome them to your organization, and you have a team of 2 people who you want to be responsible for that, you would create a team of, maybe it's Downtown Center welcome team, and add those 2 users to that team. And then with the tasks being assigned to that team, they'll essentially be kind of divided up evenly among those 2. So they wouldn't all go to one person or the other. They would be divided evenly.
And then his last question, just in Daxko operations, when you disallow an email, what does that do?
Yeah, so Amibari, I think that was similar to the question that Molly asked earlier about the allow email field, which I know there's maybe a range, there's a variety of types of member questions that line up with that. So that's something that we'll need to dig into more. The way I understand it now is if a member has disallowed email entirely for the unit, then they cannot be emailed through Daxko Engage, and that actually shows in Engage under the member record, it'll say unit email disallowed. But yeah, I think there's more that we need to dig into that one.
Awesome, I think that's it.
All right, well, if you have any more lingering thoughts, there will be more sessions like this to pick our brains. So thank you all again for joining us today. Be on the lookout for the recording and for future sessions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.